What would it look like if we took the most advanced consumer bandsaw on the market today and turned it into the Swiss Army knife of bandsaws? I'm talking about milling capabilities, I'm talking about hollow form capabilities, I'm talking about complex tapering systems, all built into one system around this crazy advanced bandsaw. Well, we're gonna do it today. The bandsaw I'm talking about is the Intelligent Alpha A15 from Harvey. This is a digital bandsaw that does all kinds of tricks, and we're gonna trick this thing out even further. Now, sitting on the CNC are the components we're gonna use, or the components we're gonna start this build with. Now, this just didn't happen. This took several days of doing and redoing designs to find something that I think will work really, really well. While a lot of my projects don't get a plan set more complicated than just a doodle on a napkin, we need to go a little bit more high tech for this. So I designed the whole thing over in SketchUp, and that does a couple of things for me. It lets me really focus on the tolerances, and I can move the parts around to their respective positions so I can look for any interferences. And so far, no interferences. Now we have to build the thing and see if our SketchUp model was telling the truth. So on the table are the components that we need for the sliding mechanism, the top of the sliding table, and the outfeed table, and then of course the linear rails. To make this work, I'm using some fairly heavy-duty linear rails. I looked for some smaller ones that weren't quite so bulky and heavy, but they're pretty expensive. Now, I found this company that I get off of Amazon. You can get a set that's 78 inches long with 4 bearing blocks for $127. In the way of beefy linear rails go, that's a pretty good price. We had to cut these down. It wasn't too bad. You want to use a carbide cutoff wheel. You can't use a bandsaw. It'll just dull the teeth. So this is what's going to make this whole thing work. We don't have the tilt mechanism or the feet or any of the real support structure done yet, but we're going to put this together and test it to make sure that that's all working. The project that we're working on today, I've been planning for over 4.5 years, or at least planning in my head. And when the folks at Harvey reached out and said, we want to send you our new Intelligent Alpha A15 to help us spread the word about it, I said, absolutely. And I knew this was the bandsaw I was going to spend a lot of time and energy building the system around. Now, a lot of folks want to know, what the heck does intelligent mean? It has a lot to do with this little box right here. But we're not going to jump into that quite yet. Let's take a look at the rest of the saw, and let me show you what I think is pretty special about it. Walking up to the saw, one of the first things you notice is their blade guide bearing system. It is really well built, and the micro tune on this is extremely responsive, and there's no slop at all, which makes it really easy to tune these in to right where you want it. And of course, they put the system above and below the table. One of the ways you can always tell if a tool is quality made is how its adjustments interact with the machine. So if I were to take this adjustment, the height adjustment for the bearing guide for cutting narrower and thicker stock, this is so smooth. Is engineered really well. They put a lot of time in the design and the manufacturing. And right off the bat, that gives me a sense of a well-built, well-designed machine. Now, it's the same for all of the 3 handles that are on this machine. So your blade tension, and then of course, the tilt mechanism or the trunnion system on here has also another smooth adjustment like this, which is amazing for tuning in those micro angles. Now, Harvey's added their nickel-coated technology to not only the tabletop, but they've added it on the inside as well. So if you look inside here and you see anything that's prone to rust is nickel-coated, so no more issues with rust. And in South Carolina, that's a pretty big deal. Now, to me, the Big Eye fence system represents a pinnacle in precision. And when they came out with it for their table saw, I fell in love instantly. And to see that on the bandsaw was just insanely exciting for a guy like me who loves precision. You can adjust this fence to wherever you want it, lock it down, and it doesn't even move a thousandth of an inch. It is just there, which makes getting those precision cuts so much nicer. No more fiddling around with the fence. Great addition to this bandsaw. Now, I wanted to stand next to this to give you a point of reference. Standing up straight, I'm a 6'2", 400-pound dude. I am a big guy. And this machine makes me look small. It is a serious piece of equipment. And if you're going to go down this path, I highly recommend that the first thing you do is put it on the Spider mobile base that was designed for it, because it's a beast. Probably the most important part of this project, or definitely top two most important parts of this project is keeping the bearings and the rails aligned as we add it to the structure that's going to become the double slide system thingamabob, technical terms. So to do that, we kept the bearings and rails together, we flipped it over, and then Maggie added the bearings, or tightened the bearings down to the substructure while everything was in place. That's going to help with the alignment, making sure that each of the bearings are in line with the rails. Now we have to kind of do that a couple of times. Now to add the rails to the substructure, what we did is we flipped it over after Maggie put the bearing blocks on, and we put the fasteners in with the bearing blocks as close to the holes as possible to keep that alignment. So we moved each one down, put screws in, and that worked out pretty good. Nice smooth action. Now we need to do that again with this one, being careful to not run these off the end because we don't have our bearing stops on there yet. So this is just going to get flipped over, and we're going to attach these with the bearing as close to it as possible. And if I'd been thinking ahead a little bit more, I'd have created a separate plate with the bearings to do that, but I didn't. So we're going to be very careful and hope for the best. Off camera, I built this little mounting system so I could install it and see how it works. This isn't going to ride smoothly as smoothly as it will when it's installed because it's sitting on a table, so there's going to be a little friction there. But I gotta say, it's working really good. And even with that friction of the table, it's not a problem. So this is going to go on top. We're going to have to make sure we get our alignment really nice. Put our bracing under here to give that support out here, and then we can try it again and see how it behaves when it's fully extended. My bet is that it's going to do a pretty good job. Now this board is acting as an alignment guide. This will eventually be replaced by the table on the bandsaw. Now the alignment here is also really important, and I want to give just like a sheet of paper between this and what will be the table on the bandsaw. And that alignment has to be pretty flawless all the way down. So this is really that last part, or second to last part, where we need to be super, super careful about our alignment. This computer is what makes this an intelligent bandsaw and all its components. Now once you go through that simple setup process, you're going to see three different controls here on the screen. The first one is your blade tension, the second one is your tilt angle, and the third is your blade speed, so feet per minute. How many feet that blade travels per minute. That's going to be 2300 or 4300. Now that's adjusted with a pulley system below the saw. Now the reason there's two different blade speeds is really simple. For the 4300 feet per minute, you want to use that anytime you're cutting hardwood or resawing really big material that's dense. The 2300 blade speed is ideal for softwoods and wetwoods. On the tilt angle, as you adjust the tilt, you're going to see what the angle of the tilt is once you've zeroed out the tilt, and you can do that over here with these commands. And then of course your blade tension. And you're always going to know that you've got the right tension simply by putting in your blade specifications here, the width of the blade and the thickness of the blade, and then you confirm. And then as you tighten that up, it's going to come up here, and as long as you're in the green, you know you've got the right blade tension. I'm always very careful about the claims that I make, and I've not been wrong in the last 25 years. This is the future. This is what all of our equipment is going to start looking like in the near future. So over the next 10 years or so, we're going to see more and more tools going to digital and AI. And what Harvey's done here is nicely integrated intelligent computing into a bandsaw. And the way they did it is elegant. So they've done a really great job on this emerging technology on a phenomenal bandsaw. Last but not least, and it's a simple thing, but it's one of the things that got me really excited about this saw, is its blade breaking technology. Watch this. Motor braking technology, so the blade stops within seconds instead of sitting there forever waiting for it to wind down, or having to step on a heavy duty foot pedal like you're, trying to smush a pumpkin. It really is nice that when I turn this off, I know that blade is going to stop very quickly. Great job on that one, Harvey. I need some way to support the outfeed table. It can't just be hanging 2 feet off the back of the bandsaw, but I still want that tilt mechanism to work. So the best I could come up with for this video is this system. So these two legs sit on the ground. This is center mass of the outfeed table, and this trunnion is in line with the trunnion on the bandsaw. So when I tilt this, it tilts at the same angle and the same pivot point as the bandsaw. At least we hope we did it right. Now all I have to do is go ahead and put this together. We can install that on the bandsaw. We can install the slider on the bandsaw and the outfeed table, tweak it, and hope it works. With the tilt mechanism done and the slider done, the last thing I need to do is build a box onto that tilting head that the outfeed table is going to sit on. Now, again, we're trying to stay as precise as we can. We are dealing with HDP, which is a material that's slightly flexible. So, who knows what's going to happen. But so far, so good. Now, with the box done, I'm adding the legs back to the system, and then we're going to be able to attach the slide mechanism to this. Now, once we attach the slide to the box, that's going to really kind of start to firm up this whole build and make it as rigid as it can be. Now, with the installation, I'm not going to go too deep into the woods because I'm probably going to change that in the near future. So we're just going to go ahead and throw it on and show you a brief bit of the installation, and then we're going to test this thing and see how it works. Pull it your way just a little. Okay. It's going to be a little weird and want to be heavy on this side for a little bit. Wow. Probably should have hooked up the dust collection before we did that, honey. That's awesome. We got it installed and I am really, really happy right now. So first things first, to lock this slider in place when we're not using it, I just got a little outhouse latch or barn door latch here. Loosen these two knobs. I wanted to put it on the front, but I didn't messed up the geometry up on the front. So these three don't line up on the front, they line up on the back. Not a big deal. But more importantly, how does the tilt mechanism work? Let's check that out. It is working perfect, exactly like we hoped. This is awesome. We know that the tilt action and all of that works really good. Let's check out the slider table. Again, that is working awesome. There are some issues, so let's talk about those next. Because this is all made out of HDP, which is a plastic, it's not as rigid as like aluminum might be. So what I've got is a little bit of sag happening here at the end of the table. So if I put a straight edge on here, you can see a little bit of gappage over here. Gappage, that's a technical term too. This is not a big deal. The engineer in me is kicking myself in the butt for not building in some adjustability into this. The little angle pieces under here that keep this whole slider table attached to the mechanism, I just replace those with something that's adjustable. So 2 parts, make it adjustable, and I can fix all of those issues. I'm not going to be able, however, to get rid of the wiggle. There's always going to be a little bit of wiggle, and I'm talking about a very small amount. So let's say in 2-foot run, a 1/16 of an inch. Not a big deal, perfectly acceptable for these terms. But when we go to an aluminum version, eventually I want to build a really solid aluminum version. All those problems kind of take care of themselves. This was absolutely the perfect bandsaw to build this system around. And we're just getting started. All those things I mentioned at the beginning of the video, hollow form cutting, tapering, milling, and even some interesting twisting opportunities for cutting spindles. All that's coming, and this is the perfect system to build that around. So when I say system, I mean add-ons, simple add-ons to this that give us all those capabilities. And those videos are coming. But for now, I think it's time that we sign off. Great bandsaw, fun build. Let me know what you think down in the comments section, and we'll see you in the next video.